He wanted an advance copy so he could know he has media people that I think it'd be good for me. Welcome into the Ben Burnett Show. My name is Ben Burnett. I don't have a guest today, but my guy on the ones and twos is a person you all know from Cadillac Jack, my second act, Carl Appen, who slide in every once in a while and make a handful of comments.
Yes, of course.
And we wanted to, so we have put together the 4th season of the Ben Burnett Show so we can shoot for the stars. And we have 5 or 6 in the tank, and we are going to release them like you would see a Netflix show, so that they're not like a Netflix show. Like
it's the Ben Burnett HBO season.
That's it. It's very Game of Thronesy. We went throwback and actually are going to release these sequentially week over week. So to date, we have had a gentleman by the name of Chip Lake who put Tom Price in Congress. He was the chief of staff for Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. He has run some very large races. He was a chief of staff for a congressman for a long time named Lynn Westmoreland. And Chip just kind of talks a little bit about the good old days and what it used to be and how his time in D.C. and working here, the experiences that are around there. Carl, what do you think is interesting when you talk to people who have literally lived inside of that business for a while? Him specifically.
I thought that it was everybody who's like, whenever you're in a field, you see so many opportunities in the field, but you can't really pursue them because you're in the field, if that makes sense. Like you see all these adjacent things. So I always think it's interesting to see what people go after when they leave things that they've been doing for a long time. So I thought it was fitting, but also telling that he was now working in some consulting and doing some port authority stuff, which makes a lot of sense. But I'm sure that he had been eyeing that golden hen for a long time, and then he couldn't pursue it.
Sure. So we've also had the mayor of Roswell, who has definitely had her run-ins with Appen Media, which I consider myself I'm a periphery. I'm like a stepbrother to Appen Media. Like, you guys are nice enough to let me come in here and pontificate and ask questions. And, you know, your brother was dumb enough to ask me if I wanted to host a show. And he asked...
We've been paying for it ever since.
And you've been paying... I mean, but, you know, in fairness to me, like, your ratings are enormous.
It's true.
So we had the mayor of Roswell, Lori Henry, who is finishing her first term as mayor.
And in pursuit of her second.
And in pursuit of her second, she has announced that she would like to continue serving the fine residents and patrons and constituents of the city of Roswell. What was interesting to you? And by the way, I you know, she wouldn't say this, but I think she was really excited because, you know, Appen Media's had their run-ins with the city of Roswell over the year. Her probably, I won't say more specifically, but definitely, look, she's a CEO. Like, whether it's her fault or not, it's her name in the paper, right?
True.
And I thought I was really proud of her because, you know, she just put on the big girl pants and walked right in here and was like, yep, you can ask me anything.
That's true.
And I thought, to be honest with you, I don't know that the ratings for it will be the best just based on some of the guests that we're about to get to. But I think through the first half of the season, she was probably the best interview we have done.
Through the first half?
Through the first half.
I think so.
What did you think was interesting? She was a lot more, not authoritative, but she was very confident, and conversational and likable. And sometimes you don't get to know these people as people. And that's one of the things I like best about this format is it's long form. It's really hard to come in here for an hour and be an asshole because I'll cut you off.
Georgia Politics Podcast every Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock?
Yep.
What interested you? The thing that I will take away from her interview was that I asked her if she had something that she could take back. Which is like asking yourself in an interview, like if you had something you could improve on as a
for sure
as a candidate for a job. It's like giving you the opportunity to say, oh, I just work too hard. I'm too committed to everything. What did you think about her answer when she said the tennis courts fiasco?
I thought it was a really interesting and honest answer, and a little bit of background, basically. And I was not in the area when this happened, so this is just a good idea. Was the city of Roswell was approached with an idea, basically someone who was willing to put up a very large like tennis facility.
And they were a family that owns a lot of Ford dealerships.
Correct. That they will not be named, but they basically put it up, and there was some mixed reactions with the citizens, and City of Roswell ended up not pursuing it. I thought it was really interesting. That was kind of her one thing that she would take back, or that she would do differently, is maybe try to go through the process a little bit differently, like in pursuit of the tennis facility, which it was a very like.
It was a huge faux pas.
You can answer that question and say, well, I work too hard, or I care too much, and hers was not really that. I mean, that was
legitimately.
She was genuinely saying that like that was an of hers that she kind of wished she would have back. Of course, she talked about how it was based on. She said that she was really early in the administration
and her counsel,
in insinuating that now. That's not a mistake that she would have made.
Did you like that I pushed back on her and said, I actually think you should come back again because there's too many people that play tennis in Atlanta, and Roswell is too nice of a city. And I'm not saying you need to build 800 tennis courts, but if you want to build 25, you won't have a nicer facility in the Southeast.
I would be interested to see whether they built that facility anywhere.
Yeah, I agree with you. So we will move on. The last local one that we have done is a lady by the name of Megan Hansen, who has announced that she is running for Congress in the 6th District, which is yet to be redrawn. So that's anybody's guess.
And that was recorded like the second week of July. Just a timestamp that one.
Timestamp that one. And today we are looking at the 23rd.
Correct.
So so I like Megan a lot. Megan is a friend. And has been. We have a ton of similar friends from, Alabama, from here. I know her through others a lot better than I know her myself, but she's somebody I feel like I could call if I had a question. Do you think that she's the kind of person who can thread the needle as the suburban woman candidate for office?
I think lots of people could be, if they just run their campaign the right way. So I think it's less about her and kind of her bones, and more about I think it depends on the people who she has around her. I was not familiar with her campaign manager that was in here, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, she was the press secretary for Kelly Loeffler, which, I mean, she had a tremendously distinguished career in the United States Senate that lasted about 14 months. So yeah, sure. I mean, it was my dad will always tell you, be particular about who you get advice from.
Right.
So one of the things that, when you say that anybody could thread the needle as the suburban woman's candidate, are you talking about Ben Burnett?
I am, actually.
You think he's the guy?
That's true.
You've been sending me.
Could just be surrounded by Ben Burnett's.
Can you imagine what I would light on fire in the Republican caucus meeting in Washington, D.C.? It might be worth it. If anybody's
cool off at Turinga, Alpharetta.
Yeah, if anybody wants to, I know. Would Kevin McCarthy make me step away from the microphone as a? Yeah, no, I don't. Kevin, I'm sorry. You're just gonna have to decommittee me. I do. I think. Let me say it a different way. If the district is as it is today, I don't think, and I say this, and I don't have much at all of a relationship with Lucy McBath or her staff. I think she's incredibly hard to beat. And I'm not sure that anybody that is in that race today is the person to do it. I hope they do.
I think that's fair. Also, again, I want to say it is July 23rd, 2021.
Yeah. Lucy has a ton of time to blow up her life.
It is definitely possible.
And then we had a gentleman on named Robert Draper, who is the editor for the New York Times Magazine. He wrote for Texas Monthly. We spent a great deal of that interview and so when we timestamped that, it was literally, I think, the week or a couple of days after longtime Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld had passed, who he had a relationship with. Talk to me about what you thought was really, what were your takeaways from there? I thought I did really good, but that was one of the first times I've ever felt like I was entirely out of my league.
He had a lot of good stories to tell. I thought it was really interesting. It was not super linear, but that does happen, when you're.
What do you mean when you say that?
It was not it was a little bit of a mixed bag. It would have been hard to kind of follow that episode from start to finish, like having an idea of really what you're about ready to hear. So you kind of have to go into it with an open mind about where they're going to take it. The New Yorker columnists are not known for being
fuzzy.
Tight, put it that way.
All right. Tight meaning
they could
you mean New York Times, not New Yorker.
Different. I thought it was New York Magazine.
Yeah.
New York Times Magazine.
New York Times Magazine. Yep. And then the last one, I think the best interview that we have done is what we're going to lead off with. I grew up in Lilburn. Shout out to all my fans in Gwinnett County. And I had a guy by the name of Corey Crowder who went to Georgia College, went to Loganville High School. I literally met him in middle school, just always been friends with him. And he is a writer for he's a writer. He's a songwriter for
The New Yorker?
for Tree Vibes, which, if you know anything about country music, is Florida Georgia Line's publishing house. He writes for Blake Shelton and Chris Young and Florida Georgia Line, and there's lots of them. You can Google him this week. That's what
we're going to. A little Zach Brown in there, maybe.
Yes, but when we talk about how the sausage gets made, country music today, quote unquote country music today, it's the pop music of the '90s, which Carl hates.
The '90s.
Carl, you were yep. 5. Yep. What was interesting to you? And so you guys know I had Cadillac Jack from my second act, longtime Kicks morning show guy, fabulous interviewer, tons of energy. I just asked him to sit in because I thought, look, I know 10% of what he knows about country music, if that. What was interesting about that interview and just listening to somebody's story? So you guys know he wrote Minimum Wage by Blake Shelton. Every number one Chris Young has had is his. He's written the last 3 or 4 singles off the Florida Georgia Line. So, I mean, guys got to be making $1 million a week just like going to the mailbox. Talk to me about what's interesting about, and this is kind of where we're going to go with the show. What's your thought process about trying to do more people behind the scenes on things that everybody knows about to sit here and grow the audience from its already massive numbers?
I think people are really interested in that, and I think we talk about it a lot with Cadillac Jack, his podcast. We talk a lot about like kind of behind the curtain, and I think a lot of people, that's kind of what he offers in the show is just kind of being someone who is, longtime morning show host and kind of like the world behind the world. And I think a lot of that came up with Corey just because he really is in his own like kind of Nashville, not just his own bubble, but kind of like in his own groove. It's more than different circles. It's kind of like entirely different areas where you're in a circle. So I think people are really interested in that.
Corey is somebody that everybody recognizes, everybody in the country, 300 million plus people recognize that artists sometimes write their songs and sometimes they don't. And very few people know somebody who's written a bunch of number ones. One, I saw him a couple years ago, literally at a show, and hadn't seen him in 5 or 6 years. I coincidentally went to Nashville last October last October, and that was the last time I've seen him. So I see him every once in a while. Like, we keep in touch just to, hey, how are you doing? Heard you on the radio. How's your mom and them? But I think everybody is interested that listens to country music as to how it gets made. And I thought the most telling thing about his song Minimum Wage was that he wrote it years ago and had sat on it, and Blake Shelton had reserved it for 3 or 4 albums. And he said, I was really frustrated to get the opportunity to work with a guy like Blake Shelton or write music for him, and then to have to watch a song that is deeply personal to me sit on the shelf and just collect dust for years was fascinating.
Yeah, I think that would be a really hard. It's really kind of like gambling, but with your own stories. Because you have to say, okay, well, is this good of a song that it really doesn't matter who puts it out, or do I really want to kind of like pick my artists well, and do I want to hold with this? And then also you have like industry pressures of who kind of has like first dibs on which songs, and that would be really hard, just because the whole idea behind the songwriters is how personal like these stories are. So it's really, it's not a Blake Shelton story. It's Corey's story.
Tell me just briefly about where you think we ought to take the show. Like, 4th season, we're a lot more mature now than we were. Sort of.
The show has matured.
The show. Yeah. If nothing else, the show is older.
Yep.
Where do you see? What do you kind of want to chase? So you've stepped away from a lot of the podcasts at App Media, and you've picked me up. I mean, you've kind of been with me the whole way, but
it's true.
You've talked strategically about where you want to take it. What do we want to do? Who do we want to be when we get older?
I think when Corey wants to get older, and when the Ben Burnett Show wants to get older, I think the idea is, again, kind of like that look behind the curtain of who's you picture kind of like the Pinocchio things, less manipulative, but more kind of like who's, everybody is super used to looking at these puppets. So like they're kind of looking at who's the host of John McCain's daughter, Megan. Okay, so like everybody's kind of like watching Meghan McCain on The View, right? Like, I think it would be interesting to be talking to like the producers of The View, who are like kind of like, creating the show and kind of putting it out there. So like the Coreys of the world, or the Chip Lakes of the world, or
the people who get people where they want to go.
Exactly.
I think that it's so interesting to kind of say that, just because successful people have a dozen people behind them, and so much of that gets missed. Like when you watch the Falcons, and I mean, I struggle to even say this with a straight face, but you look at Matt Ryan, like how many people make Matt Ryan to get him to his NFL MVP season from a couple years ago? It's got to be a lot. And it's a strength and conditioning coach, it's a nutritionist, it's an agility person, it's the right offensive coordinator, and nobody knows who any of those people are. And they're all really well compensated. And if you're in the game, you know who they are. When we talked to Megan Hansen last week, and her press secretary was sitting there, and she was like, "What else have you guys done?" And I said, "Well, we had Chip Lake on," and she goes, "I bet that is really interesting." And it was, because you see how somebody, especially somebody who's kind of backing away from it to have a little more perspective, is, it's not revisionist history necessarily if it's yours in the first person. It's easy to say, well, we lost because of X, but when it's you every single day, or, those watermark moments of when you make it, or when things turn south, or where were you when this happened, and all the work that goes into that, that's really where I want to take it. And it's not like I don't want to do this and be Joe Rogan. And I'll give your family a huge compliment. Like, my favorite part about sitting on the city council in Alpharetta are the thank yous that people give me for legitimately good reasons. And there are probably 10 of them that I will remember forever. Like, I tangibly helped somebody bring kids home. I tangibly helped these people, build whatever they wanted to build, or showed them how to navigate it, even if it's at a different level of politics. And you can point to those quote unquote watermarks. But the second favorite thing that I have, and this is really what allowed me to like want to stay away, is that or move away from it, is like I have a tremendous amount of access to all kinds of people because I've done that for 4 years. One, but Carl, I'll tell you, nobody ever stops me in downtown Alpharetta. I've had somebody stop me at the airport. Nobody ever stops me because I sit as an elected official. Somebody stops me every single quarter and was like, "You host a podcast. I've listened to it. I just got off of it." And to me, to be able to do that is like, I love how you talk to people. To me, that is the thing that, like, moving away from it, that I really wanted to chase. And our friend Jamie Bendel, who comes on, you know, every once in a while, he owns the Punchline, but he does a ton of things. He's a talent agent, sports agent, realtor. Like, the guy he just paints with so many colors. And to see people like that, like, to me, having the ability to do this is like the canvas. And they're not all really good pictures, and they're not all really bad pictures. But every time I want to get out there and do it, you know, or every time I think I'm out of people to talk to, like, somebody will reach out and say it. That's the one thing I wanted to give you guys when I was talking to Lamar. He was like, "Man, I sat on a plane coming back from Wyoming a couple weeks ago and said," I was on iTunes, and it said, "If you like this, you might like this," or on the podcast. And he goes, "I listened to 3 hours worth of your podcast." He's like, "I'd love to come do that sometime." And I was like, holy shit, it finally happened. Somebody listened to it and was like, "I would really like to come be a guest one time." I've never done that. And I'm always amazed at, we've had some people with high profiles that have never sat on a podcast to do a long form interview. Doug Collins will sit here and tell you, he was, you know, the last time through, and he was running for U.S. Senate after the Trump impeachment. Like, he was one of the most famous members of Congress. He's like, "I've literally never done it." When you sent this to me, I was like, I don't know how this is going to go, but it sure sounds like fun. And I think it's neat because there are so many things coming out of a background like I had with Saturday Down South, and watching something grow to millions of unique viewers a week. Like, I know what, you know, when you know you're right, Carl, and like everybody doesn't know you're right yet.
Yep.
That's exactly what this whole format is. It's unique to an individual listener's taste. And look, I'm not for everybody. I mean, as a politician, I'm for everybody. But you know, it's almost like when you pick your go-to drink at the gas station. Like, I'm a Mountain Dew guy. I'm a Coke Zero guy. And the next person, something else. Like, it's not for everybody. And I think that that's what's really unique. And I think that that's one of the things that has made Cadillac Jack so successful, is that he doesn't have to appeal to everybody anymore. Right. But how do you harness that? Where do we think, like, and so we've been able to monetize the show to some degree. But when does that really transpire? How do you get to a place where people are like, I don't know how we judge how many times people listen to you, but we know they do?
I think it's kind of like the most recent hump that you talk about is the people who are listening on the show and saying, "Hey, I stumbled across this and then I listened to it for 3 hours, and I'd love to be on it." I guess the next step would be somebody saying, I stumbled across the show, I listened to it for 3 hours. How can I advertise on it, or how can I bring you onto our show, or how can I kind of like set up some sort of partnership with you? So I guess that's the next one. As
you've done this and been very involved in a podcast network, how have you seen people monetize podcasts? Is it go to this website, put my code in? Is it I'm just going to pay you $25,000 a month to advertise for Mercedes? And Carl and I, in total transparency, before we launched the 4th season of the show, we went to high-end jewelers. We went to Mercedes. We went to Land Rover. It was like, look, if we're going to do it, we're going to be like Tom Brady and Roger Federer. Like, we're going high-end.
We should have called Rolex.
I don't. I mean, do you think that this podcast is like Roger Federer-esque, Tiger Woods? Sure. I don't. Never will. But I wanted to check in. We're going to put this out next week. The beginning of season 4 comes out on August the 2nd.
It's true. August the 2nd.
And we're going to roll Corey Crowder first, and we have agreed to let all the people in Nashville have this in advance because you're just going to see it explode all over the internet.
And if you are listening and you are Roger Federer, give us a call.
I would love to have you, Roger Federer. I want to thank my friends at Chiringa for coming on. We're going to give them that one for free.
Yep.
You like seafood, frosé.
Yep.
All those things. Have you been down there with your trade?
It's true. And into the Panhandle a little bit, both in Alpharetta and where is it?
Down on 30A and
Yep.
Blue Mountain Beach.
Yep.
God, you can get super drunk
Yep.
down there. All right, everybody. We will see you next week.